What would you do if a stranger demanded that you be taken off a plane, but you weren't even there? An ordinary flight, a disturbed passenger, a woman only he can see, and a guilt so dark it won't leave him in peace, even with his eyes closed. Are you ready to uncover the truth that drove him to madness? Flight 237 of Aerolíneas del Sur was headed to Mexico City. It was 6:23 a.m., and the airport was packed. In the waiting area, a man in a beige suit, neatly trimmed beard, and arrogant gaze looked around with disdain. His name was Ernesto Vidal, a 52-year-old businessman, known for his imposing demeanor, shady deals, and unpleasant remarks. When boarding was announced, Ernesto was one of the first to stand. He walked down the jet bridge with confident strides, as if everything belonged to him. He settled into seat 8A in business class, removed his jacket, and took out his laptop intending to work during the flight. But then, something made him frown. A black woman, around 60, wearing a dark blue dress and an old-fashioned hat, stopped in front of him. "Excuse me, sir. That's my seat," she said, her voice soft but firm, pointing to the seat beside Ernesto. He looked her up and down with a sneer he didn't bother to hide. "You must be mistaken. This is a business-class flight, ma'am. Do you even have a ticket for this section?" The woman stared at him without blinking, without moving, without saying another word. She just looked at him. "Help! Flight attendant!" Ernesto shouted, standing abruptly, agitated. "This woman is in a place she doesn't belong. I demand she be taken off the plane." Passengers nearby began to watch. A flight attendant hurried over. "What seems to be the problem, sir?" "This woman. She insists on sitting here. She doesn't belong in this section. She doesn't belong here. Just look at her." He pointed with contempt. "Take her out right now." The attendant blinked, confused. Then she looked in the direction Ernesto was pointing. "What woman are you talking about, sir?" "Her!" Ernesto yelled, now red with rage, staring directly at the woman who continued to watch him silently, her expression neutral, but her eyes piercing into his face like blades. "Sir, there's no one here." The sentence hit like a hammer. Ernesto looked at her, then looked at the empty seat. The woman was gone. "What kind of trick is this? You all saw her too. She was here." The flight attendant tried to calm him, but he was losing it. He unbuckled his seatbelt, stumbled backward, and tripped over another seat. "I saw her. She was here. She spoke to me. I'm not going crazy." Passengers whispered among themselves. A man filmed the scene on his phone. The pilot was informed, and airport security arrived. As they escorted him off the plane, Ernesto shouted incoherently. "Her name was Clara Marquez. I knew her. She worked at my company. She was a secretary. She took her own life, but it wasn't my fault. It wasn't my fault." The name struck a chord with one of the younger flight attendants, who searched on her phone. A few minutes later, she found an old article. 58-year-old secretary commits suicide after suffering harassment and discrimination at work. Her family claims constant insult from her boss drove her into irreversible depression. The photo accompanying the article showed a woman identical to the one Ernesto claimed to have seen. A week later, Ernesto Vidal was admitted to a high-security psychiatric clinic. He didn't sleep, didn't eat, and spoke of nothing else. He insisted he saw her everywhere, in the bathroom mirror, reflected in his window, sitting at the edge of his bed. And every time he saw her, Clara never said a word. She just stared at him. San Lucas Psychiatric Hospital was on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by tall trees and white walls meant to convey peace. But Ernesto Vidal felt no peace. Each night, the nightmare returned with greater intensity. Clara, in the corner of the room, standing there in her blue dress and slightly tilted hat, she watched him. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She just stared. "Get out." Ernesto would scream until he was breathless. "You're not alive. You're not alive." The nurses would rush in, hold him down, inject something into his arm, and the lights would blur. But before his eyes closed, always Clara was still there. The psychiatrist assigned to his case, Dr. Hugo Morales, documented everything with professional detachment. At first, he assumed it was a typical guilt-induced delusion, but something didn't add up. Ernesto wasn't just convinced about what he was seeing. The details he gave about Clara were impossible to make up. He knew her middle name. He knew the exact date of her death. He knew things that had never been made public, like how she collected keychains and had a sister with schizophrenia living in Veracruz. Things not even the article mentioned. And most disturbing of all, he spoke of a letter. She says she knows what I did, that I hid her goodbye letter, that I tore it up, that I never let her family see it, he told the doctor one afternoon, his hands trembling. And it's true. I found it in her desk. It said she couldn't go on, that I had killed her in life. And I burned it. I didn't want trouble. But now, she won't leave. That night, the doctor couldn't sleep. A few days later, Ernesto was found in his room with his eyes wide open, his skin completely pale, mute, paralyzed. He didn't respond, didn't blink, didn't eat. Tests revealed no brain damage. It was as if his mind had collapsed. The hospital staff decided to move him to another room. A young nurse volunteered to clean his former cell. In one of the drawers, hidden behind a small book, she found a crumpled sheet of paper. It was a letter, handwritten, the ink blurred by dried tears. If anyone finds this, I want them to know I didn't take my life out of sadness. It was out of helplessness, because they treated me like I was nothing, because Ernesto Vidal looked at me like I wasn't human, because every day was a new humiliation, because I got tired of asking for help, because I got tired of pretending it didn't hurt, because I didn't want to live like this anymore. The nurse slowly lowered the page, her skin covered in goosebumps. Behind her, reflected in the window glass, Clara was watching her, and for the first time, she smiled.